department. With me now is Shami Chakrabarti, the former director of Liberty, and Richard Barrett, the former director of Global Counter-Terrorism for MI6. Good evening to you both. Richard Barrett, first of all, there can be no softer target than in a church with an 80-odd-year-old priest and some nuns and 2 other worshippers. There can be no softer target. The series of soft targets in France and now in Germany, I mean, IS presumably will use these to destabilise whether or not they were the instigators.
Well, absolutely. IS will take advantage of anything that happens. And, of course, our own reaction is to assume that it's IS as well, because they've been quite successful at that. So when you think of all the soft targets there are in the world, in any one country or any country that could be the target of IS, it's very hard to know what you should do to try and protect the public.
The contract between the state and the citizen is that the state will try and keep the citizen safe and secure while giving the citizen freedoms. But, you know, Sarkozy was saying today, is that possible when the enemy has no taboos, no limits, no morals, no borders? Are we going to have to change the way that we look at security?
Well, I would say quite the reverse, because, you know, the whole point of IS is to undermine the cohesion of society, to erode human rights and the observance of human rights and so on, and to make people feel that they're being discriminated against, and in fact the governments they live under are not doing a good job at looking after them and protecting them. So I think that actually, you know, as was said famously after the Breivik attacks 5 years ago, what we need is more democracy, not less.
But, Shami, you know, people get murdered and we don't expect the state to stop every murder. But do we expect the state to stop every act of terrorism? Or is Manuel Valls right, you simply have to live with it?
Well, we all live with risk in our lives, but Richard's so right. The point about terrorism is that it provokes to get a reaction. So if, for example, Angela Merkel has been a stabilising influence on the continent of Europe, then that has to be undermined. Now, I suspect we've seen so many horrors in recent weeks and months, including, by the way, the murder of an MP on our own streets. Absolutely. I suspect that if the alleged perpetrator had been of a different race, we would have been discussing whether that could have been claimed by it. So what I suspect is going on here is, of course, some of these incidents are orchestrated, some of them are inspired, and some of them are claimed after the event, regardless of what happened. And in a sense, we have to deal with risk, we have to deal with our own fears, and we have to make sure that we don't close down our open society, because that is, I hate to keep saying this, that is what IS wants.
But we do expect the state to have a certain degree of surveillance, a certain degree of security. And of course, we know after the Paris attacks, thousands were interviewed.
Yep.
And we know there was a failure of security today because one of the attackers actually had an electronic tag on. So
Well, I mean, one of the attackers had an electronic tag on, and that raises a question too about how many people you can put under total surveillance at any one time. And one of the things that I suspect we have in common is that this idea of the risk-free society is the enemy of the spook and the enemy of the civil libertarian. Because if politicians promise the risk-free society every time there is an attack, then the security services and the police are to be blamed. But equally, every time there is an attack, civil liberties are to be shut down.
But the political imperatives, we do expect our security service to deliver for us, and there has to be a curtailing of certain freedoms.
Well, I'm not sure that, you know, I mean, that has to be put to public test, I think,
Yes.
as to how much freedom they'd like to be curtailed. But, I mean, Shami's absolutely right, of course. You know, the problem of looking at everybody who could possibly be a future perpetrator of a terrorist crime, you know, is amazing. I mean, in France, for example, they have 300 people who've come back from Iraq, Syria. They have another 800 people who have been stopped from going to Syria. That's already 1,100 people. And then you've got to add on all the people they don't know about. So, you know, we have to keep these things into proportion. And we have an idea that we can completely eliminate the threat from terrorism, but we don't regard any other crime in that way. You know, I mean, unfortunately,
does behaviour have to change? I mean, you know, the behaviours even of children in schools, and you know, you used to be, you know, duck and cover for the nuclear threat. No. Do we actually have to become more aware of terrorism?
I don't think it's about duck and cover, but I do think that we need to reflect. We had an opportunity after 9/11 and again after 7/7. And now they have a similar opportunity in France and in Germany. I hope they go more the way that Norway went after Breivik and not the way that we went after 9/11 and 7/7. Yes, we need a more vigilant society, but we need a stronger civil society. We need vigilance in communities, but not.
But you're not. But the thing is, you are. How do you maintain a cohesive society? We already know that things are changing in Germany. Even in the last few weeks, after as you know, Gabriel Gatehouse was saying, the wonderful welcome the refugees had. How do you keep society cohesive when we know already that there's a lot of division?
Well, yes, the problem. I mean, you know, as he said, you know, there's over 1 million refugees now in Germany. How many refugees have been arrested on terrorism charges? I should imagine less than 5. You know, I imagine it's a tiny percentage. So, you know, we're extrapolating from this security threat into, you know, anxiety about immigrants.
If I were ISIS, I would be seeking to positively undermine Angela Merkel's policy on refugees right now, because it's out of division, it's out of alienation and injustice that you are able to recruit terrorists.
Before we finish now, I just want to change the subject here, because there were reports that you had refused a peerage, but rather than asking you that, I'd just like a straightforward answer. Is there a peerage in the offing? Because that has been discussed, that a Labour peerage might be in the offing for you.
Well, I don't know, Kirsty. Are you going to take one?
I have been offered one, have you?
Many times.
Shami Chakrabarti, Richard, thank you very much indeed.